Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Uh-oh. All right, time to go. All right, good morning. Hey, how you doing, everybody? It is me. It is another show. It is Monday, May 3rd. Happy May 2021. We missed May Day on the air because it was Saturday. Is that right? Okay. Just trying to get my bearings here. There's another day in the weekend. I'm pretty sure of it. It didn't feel like it. I didn't get one of the traditional sleep late days over the weekend for various reasons, but whatever. I'll just go to sleep now, and that'll take care of things. All right, we're all ready to launch another show today, and the good news is that Greg Dworkin, I think, will be able to join us. I think he's been sending a raft of stories as though everything was fine. It sounds like the computer is okay. Well, it'll hold on for a little while longer. I understand perhaps a new one is on order or otherwise in the offing, but this one can limp along until the new one shows up. So fingers crossed that all goes well and that it has been able to use the internets to look up good stories and then communicate them with us so we can pass them on and have Greg do it in his own voice as well. So let's see, what have we got on tap today? We'll ask the squirrel guy from Maine. The Kagro in the Morning radio show is live now. That part is correct so far. So good. Okay, let's keep working on it. Kagro X, that's me. All right, that's good. That's a check mark there, too. Confirms America's latest self-evident truth. Ooh, good. It's about time for another one. It's been like 200 and something years. America's latest self-evident truth is Mike Flynn doesn't know the Pledge of Allegiance. Yeah, that's a weird one. Well, not the American one anyway. That could be true. There could be other ones out there. We don't know for sure. He could be pledging allegiance to any number of flags or countries. I saw that there was video of him circulating over the weekend, and I can't tell whether it's a momentary hiccup and he gets embarrassed and flustered and loses his place, and then, or what, or maybe he may never have known it. That's a possibility too. He might not really understand what it means to be on a microphone and how your voice rises above the voices in the crowd. Even if everyone in the place knows the Pledge of Allegiance and is shouting it along with you, you'll still be heard over them. But he fumbles it right after the first line. He gets the first part out. I pledge allegiance to the flag. And then he might even have gotten the United States of America out. And then he just sort of flubs it and then falls silent while the crowd, whom he has invited to join him in reciting the pledge, shouts on, and they just keep going. And then he picks it up at the end with liberty and justice for all, I think is basically what he says at the end. So, that's probably because he's an active spy for other countries and he forgets the Americanisms that you're supposed to use to show that you're totally not a spy. So I'm right about that one. I'm right about a bunch of things, as it turns out. I had a good weekend in terms of being right about things. Unfortunately, mostly it's about being right about awful things that are happening. Just to make a note, maybe, here comes Greg now. Maybe Greg has some idea what's going on with this. Just noting the outrage of the day, apparently, is the Fox News alert that woke America is canceling Disney, or at least some parts of Disney. I understand Snow White and Sleeping Beauty are in trouble, and we're really not sure why that is or what they're making up about it, but I guess we'll get to the end of it. One or the other of them may in fact, turn out to be a plastic potato. That may bother them. Apparently, that's a huge problem for Republicans. Anyway, lots of things to be right about over the weekend. So many, in fact, that it's like a blur. I've forgotten what has happened over the weekend. So it's a good thing Greg is here and Greg's computer is working well enough to...
Well enough.
Yeah, okay. All right. Cool. It's good to have you back, Greg. Good morning. How are you?
At the very bottom of my Skype list, I screenshotted the warning I get every hour.
Warning, this may not work.
Yeah, this may not work, but I know it's working so far, but don't be fooled, it says. So my new laptop, desktop is on order, and it should come in about 10 days. And hopefully that'll fix everything. It'll be a problem, though. It'll be somewhat disorienting because the new desktops make you use the new operating system.
Oh, okay.
And I'm used to the old operating system, which allows for 32-bit programs. So I have to see with the new one. There is a way to migrate everything, but I have to see what works and what doesn't work. And so that's going to be more than just, okay, it's set up and I push the button and now I'm ready to go. It's going to be a several-day process, unfortunately.
Okay.
Kind of like testing out the rover on Mars. You do a little bit at a time and see how that works. But so far, so good. And yeah, you've been right about a lot of things. The filibuster, which you were right about for a decade, is still coming up.
Sure.
I got a piece on that. Actually, an anti-filibuster filibuster, that is to say, Bill Scher writing, 100 days of the Biden presidency, 13 bills passed in the Senate, 10 bills signed into law, 0 filibusters. Maybe the Senate isn't broken. My latest for the Washington Monthly. Now, we agree on Twitter, when I pointed out to him the big stuff is yet to come, that Schumer has simply put off some of the big stuff. The Voting Rights Act, gun control, that sort of thing. So what you can get done without a filibuster is getting done, and what you can't get done without a filibuster remains to be seen. And the flip side of that coin is the idea somehow that, Biden is playing this in a way that actually maximizes, as they like to say, the hand he was dealt. I mean, for example, Merriam-Webster's word of the day.
Yes.
Right? When Trump was president, you'd see things like word of the day is insurrection. Today, good morning, today's word of the day is conciliatory, intended to make someone less angry. So, yeah, that's the way Biden is playing it. And you know what? There's polling on that.
Oh, well, that plays right into your
nearly
hands.
2/3 of Americans, 64% are optimistic about the direction of the country as President Joe Biden completes his first 100 days in office per a new ABC Ipsos poll. 51% of Americans think President Biden is compromising about the right amount with congressional GOP leaders on the most pressing issues, and 2/3 say GOP leaders are doing too little to compromise with Biden.
Wow, 2/3. We could suspend the rules.
Yeah. Slim majority think the federal government should spend to revitalize the economy, even if it raises taxes, including 80% of Democrats and 54% of independents. And 23% of Americans think the country's become more united since Biden. And among this group, 87% give Biden credit. The ones who don't feel like it's become more united blame the insurrectionists.
Yeah. All right. Sure. This is looking good.
Well, I just added that. That's not a real polling statistic, but it's true. I do. So therefore it must be true, which of course leads me to my next observation here, which is from the New York Times, which is a really cool little piece. It's interactive.
Small little paper.
A subscriber to use it. The New York Times, Do You Live in a Political Bubble?
Sure.
By Ryan Enos, one of my favorite political scientists who I'm in contact with all the time on Twitter. Do you live in a political bubble? You put in your address, and it tells you how your neighbors voted.
Aha.
And it's really kind of interesting. So I put in my address, and I found that 9 out of 10 of my neighbors voted for Joe Biden.
Hey, all right.
And I know the one that didn't because he had a Trump flag. Right? I mean, for the most part, we in New England don't talk about politics and religion, except for Trumpers who put Trump flags out.
Right. I mean, that's a good indicator. Leading indicator.
So I know who the 9, I know who the 9 are, therefore, because I know who the 1 is.
Right. Well, sure.
So it's really interesting. So what it says, how politically diverse is your neighborhood? You put it in, and then you see, this one happens to be focused on New York City and environs. And, except for Staten Island, it's extremely, extremely blue, with a little bit of reddish area here in Queens. And of course, there's always Howard Beach, and there's always the particular areas that you can point to and say, oh, I know why that's a little bit red. I know who lives there. I know what ethnic group. So always interesting. But in my area, although 9 out of 10 in my particular zip code happen to be Biden Biden voters.
Yeah.
One zip code away, it's 50-50. So, and one zip code away here is walking distance.
Yeah, right. True.
So, it's a interesting place. It's like a 54%, old-fashioned Cook report lean. And we usually elect local Republicans and Democratic national people.
Yes. Okay.
And that way everybody feels like they're getting the right mix between don't raise my taxes, but I can't stand what you guys are doing.
And, things stay in stasis.
Right. And as when I first moved here 30 years ago, the first thing people said that knew me took me aside and said, listen, Republicans here aren't national Republicans and Democrats here aren't national Democrats. It's just as likely the crooks are Democrats and local real estate people. But I repeat myself. And, and car dealers. And as the Republicans. And so you can't tell anything by the label when you're looking locally. On the other hand, national is national.
Great. Oh, all right. Well, at least there's that. You can look up the local people.
So you can look up the local people is the point. So that's kind of fun.
Now I do.
And, what else is going on? Well, I haven't even mentioned Rudy Giuliani and the raid on his home, which is also a raid on Joe DeGeneva and Victoria Tonsing, who were fellow travelers.
Yeah, I didn't see DeGeneva's name mentioned. But
yeah, I know. And all I know is Tonsing's home was raided. And I'm just wondering, did they live together? What's going on?
Maybe they don't.
How come his home wasn't raided?
I don't know. Does he live next door? Is he around the corner? Does he have a Trump flag?
Remains to be seen. But, the question is going to be who else gets pulled in the orbit. I guess a story today from NBC News, outlines the usual suspect. That is to say, Lev Parnas and whoever the Ukrainian prosecutor was who was corrupt.
Oh, yeah.
And, all the names that you've come to know and love
our friends
through the Mueller report are coming to life now. And so the idea that now that Bill Barr is not there blocking things, all of these things are coming to light is pretty interesting. And then the side piece of that, of course, is the Matt Gaetz stuff. Because the fellow in Florida who was trying to use the Venmo things that Gates sent him in order to buy the services of women, including underage women, mentions trying to go, and here's the unifying field theory here, to Roger Stone and or Jared Kushner in order to try to buy a pardon for things that might come out later.
Yeah. Right, and there was that weird speculation right at the end that Trump might be experimenting with secret pardons to be opened later, which nobody has ever heard of. Maybe we'll find out. I don't think he did anything extra,
Yeah,
on the way out the
but
door,
then, people were playing that clip of Rudy Giuliani saying, I'm not worried about Trump turning on me. I have insurance.
Yeah, well, there is that too. However...
What does that mean?
As a normal person, I would know what to think about that. But he's stupid and crazy, so it might be nothing. But we'll see. I'd love to... what a test. Bring it out. Why not? Right. I'd love to see what you have to say.
So that's going on. So the idea, the theme of my pundit roundup today was simply that the insurrection isn't gone, it isn't over.
No.
And the idea that it isn't gone and it isn't over is probably best summed up by watching the weird Arizona recount. I still don't understand why it's being allowed to go on.
Well, they're suing about it, but, wheels of justice.
It's a slow suit.
Yeah. That's
something about, yes, we're suing over it, but you want us to pay money in order to win the suit, and so we're not going to, so it's going to happen anyway. It's the more it goes on, the more fraudulent the whole thing looks, and I just don't get it. But, this parallel article here is on what's going on with Florida with the Republicans there rushing to curb mail voting, according to the Washington Post, after Trump's attacks on the practice. But now some fear it could lower GOP turnout because they often win on those absentee older
we went through
voter ballots. And so be careful what you wish for and all of that stuff. So the idea is, basically, if you step back and look at the big picture, what Republicans are trying to do in state after state, whether it's Texas or Arizona or Georgia or Florida, is eliminate everything except day of election voting, and then use the Arizona-style recount to put the fix in.
Sure. If you lose, you just...
Because if you only have all-day voting one day and you're in charge of it, you can do whatever the hell you want.
I guess so, especially if you're in charge of what happens after.
Yeah. So, that's why the whole thing is so chilling. And I get that it's probably going to fail, and I get that it's exposing them to ridicule, but it's really chilling that it's being allowed to happen at all.
Yeah, I mean, why don't we expose it to ridicule by ridiculing how they wanted it to happen, but they couldn't make it happen because that's not a thing that happens. Yeah. I wouldn't mind that.
That's why I was disappointed with the lawsuit that said, okay, well, if the Democrats don't pay the money, you get to still do it.
Wow.
Why?
Well, I don't know, because I think you said paid money. I think that's it. That's just the way Republicans govern. Are you paid money? All right. I guess you can do what you want.
At the same time, another story, New York Times, GOP seeks to empower poll watchers, raising intimidation worries. Republicans in several states are pushing bills to give poll watchers more autonomy. Alarmed election officials and voting rights activists say it's a new attempt to target voters of color. Well, duh, it is. The whole thing is. The whole project is.
Rarely anything else, I guess. More autonomy.
Right.
I mean, guns
Republicans have offered little evidence to justify a need for poll watchers to have expanded access and autonomy, as they have done for other election changes, including reduced early voting, stricter absentee ballot requirements, and limits on drop boxes. They've grounded their reasoning in arguments that the voters want more secure elections, and that desire was born out of Trump's repeated lies about last year's presidential contest.
Yes.
Well, we need it because our voters don't trust the vote. They don't trust the vote because you are lying to them.
You told them not to.
You told them not to trust the vote. And look, they don't trust the vote. So now we're obligated to do these things.
Yeah. That's something. That feedback loop is pretty incredible. That I don't understand why that's not clear to more of the journalists covering this stuff. You can't say, everybody, you shouldn't trust the vote. Hey, my voters say they don't trust the vote. I'm only voting to reject their electoral votes because my voters have questions. I wrote them down on a slip of paper and asked them to ask those questions, but what could I do?
Yes, and a reminder, I'm not saying that the election was stolen. I'm just asking questions about it.
Right.
I'm not saying vaccines don't work. I'm just asking questions about it.
My question is, will someone please ask this question about the election? Look, questions are being asked. Right. Yeah. I saw something this morning. I don't think I even put... Oh, yeah, I did. I did save it. Juan Williams writing in The Hill. Nobody's favorite paper, obviously, but I liked this headline. Was just... GOP turns lies into laws. It just summed things up nicely, I thought. I'll explore the article later, perhaps, but throw you the headline for now.
Right. That reminds me of one of my favorite old Mad Magazine, William M. Games, Mad Magazine ads. I think it was from the 50s. About, pay your money and we'll send you weightlifting advice. And the title on the ad was How to Turn a Chump into a Chimp.
Okay. Sure.
Oh, you kicked sand in my face, did you? Well, I'll just pay you $500 on advice on how to do exercises. And then at the end of it, they say, yeah, well, good. You did my 5 exercises. Now pay us $8,000 more for your set of weights that I'll send you in the mail.
This wasn't even a Trump
Postage due.
Trump would have done this. Trump-branded weights. They'll make you huge.
Anyway, it was a great ad, and I always think about that. Mad Magazine had some great ones. One of my other favorites is the classic parody of Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea, which they called Voyage to See What's on the Bottom. And, it's true. I mean, it's there, so you go. And that's why we're on Mars.
Oh, yeah.
So if you think it's not relevant,
I had not
totally
put those two things together. Okay. I'll take it.
Right? It's absolutely contemporaneous. So that's what's basically going on in politics. Margaret Sullivan is writing an interesting story about WITF, an all-news public radio station in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
WITF?
WITF. And you know why it's interesting?
Is the I stand for interesting?
I
don't know why.
right?
Yeah.
This particular station will not book insurrectionists. They're like CNN State of the Union with Jake Tapper. They're about the only show that won't have these people on. The journalists at WITF, an all-news public radio station in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, made a perfectly reasonable decision a few months ago. They decided they wouldn't shrug off the damaging lies of election denialism. They wouldn't do what too many in big journalism have done, that's capitalized, in recent months, shove into the memory hole the undemocratic efforts by some Republican elected officials to delegitimize or overturn the 2020 presidential election.
Yeah.
Too many Sunday news shows repeatedly booked Kevin McCarthy, Ted Cruz, Ron Johnson, without reminding viewers how these members of Congress tried to undo the results of the election.
It is surprising. There was a moment.
It's amazing.
Where
why are these people on, and why are you doing this?
I don't know. I like the call letters. I don't know what the I would be for, but I like the WTF part anyway. I'm not sure what I is.
Right.
But...
it's not WIWW.
Okay.
That would be funny. It's just a coincidence.
Right.
You think we're international workers of the world? No, it's just a coincidence.
Not us, right. But that's interesting. So, I mean, I did think, I don't know. I mean, I guess I never really trusted that would happen on the network Sunday talk shows, but it seemed like such an interesting thing to consider doing. And not that I really believe that they would do it. But, well, leave it to somebody, small local area public radio station do. I'm glad. See if they can extend the model, but not only are they having the insurrectionists on, but they're in many cases, as usual, having entire panels of insurrectionists with nobody who was on the other side available to say anything. Well, both sides eventually was someone.
So Kevin Cruz writes in this article, there's kind of a clubby atmosphere in these shows, part of the Beltway bubble mentality, in which it's become almost impolite to raise the topic of the insurrection.
Yes.
CBS This Morning, for example, sent out an email alert last week touting its exclusive interview with Rick Scott, one of the 7 senators who voted against certifying the election results in Pennsylvania. Right? 109 days after January 6th, history will remember as a complete joke, Matt Negrin of The Daily Show tweeted. These media outlets want you to forget.
Yes.
But this particular outlet, WITF, they went a different route. They want you to remember. Right?
Yes. And of course, some people do want you to just forgive and forget. That was circulated earlier this morning, too. Our friend Rebecca Romans as a GOP senator, in the headline, GOP senator begs for spirit of forgiveness after insurrection. It's time to move on, the Raw Story headline. And I looked at the picture and I said, I don't have any idea who that GOP senator is.
Yeah, it's time to move on from the Senate to
knowing
jail.
who he is. Yeah, that's a way of moving on.
I'll be moving on as soon as the van gets here and I can put all my stuff in it. So this story says the station has stuck to its pledge in its day-to-day coverage ever since. And this is all we're asking for here.
Good,
this
we're still on
difficult.
this one.
By simply and without fanfare, including boilerplate language about how lawmakers conducted themselves during the attempts to overturn the election whenever they're mentioned in the course of regular news coverage.
Yeah.
For example, a recent story about a state legislator's efforts to get Pennsylvanians vaccinated was accompanied by a sidebar of text about the lawmaker in question. State Senator Ryan Almont, R. Lancaster, was one of 17 Republican state senators who signed the January 4th letter that asked Congress to delay election college certification because it said incorrectly SCOTUS is to hear Trump versus Bukvar in the coming days.
No? Okay.
That's what it says. On January 11th, SCOTUS refused to fast-track the case. The election fraud lie led to the attack on the Capitol. So they just include that in their story.
Yeah. You write it once, and it's there, and you just run it again next time.
Right. It's brilliant. And so you should do that. And it's part of the truth sandwich that people talk about.
Oh,
tell the truth, then you can tell their lie, and then point out why it's a lie, and that the truth is really something else.
Yeah. All right. I mean, I'm good with that. And by the way, one suggestion, Matt here has sent us, he must be listening live. So, hey, Matt. Hi, Matt. Suggests that the I is just for in. So, what in the F? So that's their call letters. WITF. What is in the news today?
Yeah, it's not WTAF.
Right.
I'd love to have
the actual one we understand. But yeah. Now this is, I mean,
the actual? What?
Yeah. I don't know, just on the fly, on the radio, I need an I word. I mean, he came up with the shortest possible.
With news easy. You won't actually
should have been easy. Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, I like it. So now that I'll remember the call letters. Where are they from?
Harrisburg, Pennsylvania.
All right. I'm moving. Good.
All right. New polling out from Reuters, and relatively newish. That's April 29th. Many Republican voters agree with Biden. Trickle-down economics has failed. Majority of Americans support measures favored by Joe Biden to substantially redistribute wealth, according to an Ipsos poll for Reuters, including tax hikes on the wealthy and a higher minimum wage. The National Opinion Poll also found Republican voters were divided over trickle-down, championed by their party's leaders since President Reagan some 40 years ago. Part of the whole deal here, and it's just so interesting when you're watching the antics of, let's say, Liz Cheney and Republicans maneuvering to remove him from leadership, which they'll probably do to her in the next month, is that Reagan has failed. The Democrats aren't scared of him, and the Republicans don't refer to him. So people who champion Ronald Reagan, like Mitt Romney, get booed and heckled at their own Republican conventions in their own states.
Yeah.
They didn't quite go for censure, but, we're the party of Reagan. Actually, you're not.
Yeah.
And why? So the Republicans don't think that they're the party of Reagan, and the Democrats aren't scared of Reagan. And so the Reagan era is really over, and Americans are saying, you know what? Government isn't the problem. Government is the solution. Now, not big government forever, but the idea that you can't do anything because they're going to bring up Reaganism and therefore you'll lose, no.
Okay.
Over.
Well,
you got to move on. That's what you move on from, not the insurrection.
Good. Not the guy that said the GOP senator I never heard of. All right. Well, exactly. I have started our music a little bit late, so we actually have to take our break immediately. We'll be right back. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I'm giving it my best shot at estimating how we're doing on time since I started the music late, but I think everything will be okay now. At any rate, the point is we're broadcasting. Greg's here. There's more. There's pandemic news. There's, I don't know, hypocritical Republicans, whatever you want to go with. What's next?
Well, I think it's worthwhile to talk a little bit more about the pandemic that isn't over yet. The numbers are looking pretty good. For a lot of things. Ashish Jha, for example, the dean of the Brown School of Public Health, points out in a little 4-tweet series here, which is short enough to read.
Okay.
At what point should we see cases in the U.S. begin to drop sharply from vaccinations? Complicated, but experience from Israel says 45 to 50% of the population vaccinated. Now, the U.S. as a whole is shy of that.
Oh.
But some states are past that threshold.
Right.
So,
yes, that much we know.
Do we have evidence it's working? Why, yes, we do.
Oh, good.
Let's look at the top 5 vaccinated states. Notice they're all in New England. New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Connecticut, Vermont, and Maine.
Okay.
All greater than 50% of the population, 1 dose or more.
Well, Vermont, that's like lemonade.
And
stand.
what's happening with cases? Well, New Hampshire actually leads the pack.
Oh.
They've modified their live free or die saying in 2021 to live.
Right.
The abbreviated
vaccines
New
are
Hampshire
free
motto now. So
die.
What's happening with cases consistent with 2 weeks ago? New Hampshire's down 44 compared with 2 weeks ago. New Hampshire's down 44%.
Yes.
Massachusetts down 37%. Connecticut cases are down 40%. Vermont is down 46%, and Maine is down 42%. I know they're all New England states, but let's look broadly at cases and vaccinations. If we take the 10 states with the largest drop in cases, the average vaccination rate is 49.8%. And the cases in 10 states who are rising, they're closer to 39.9%. So somewhere around 45 to 50% of the population gets vaccinated. That is to say 65% or so adults. And the cases really start turning around.
Okay.
So we're almost there. That's why when we were talking about don't ease up too early, we're not talking about another 6 months. We're talking about another couple of weeks. That's what I meant when we were saying that. And Ashish Jha points out it's hardly definitive, but it appears around 50% of the population or 65% of adults vaccinated may be a turning point. Now, other factors matter, prior infection rates, but nationally, slow decline in cases are masking sharp drops in states with high vaccination rates. That's good.
Yes.
So if you get at least one dose in, that makes a difference. Now, don't forget, there's a lot of scams happening.
Oh.
And one of the biggest professional large-scale scams that people aren't talking about, my reporter friend Lauren Weber, who writes for Huffington Post and for CNN and for Kaiser Foundation, freelancer, has a story in CNN today. Schools spending millions on air purifiers often sold using overblown claims.
Okay, interesting.
Right? You know, it reminds me of the old joke about millions spent on a ballpoint pen that would write in the free gravity of space.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Or you could just use a pencil.
Oh, yes. Okay, I get you.
Remember that one?
Yes, I like the pens, though.
Well, you could open the windows, or you can spend millions on air purifiers, often sold using overblown claims.
True. But, well, not all windows open. But I'm
yes,
interested
not
about
all
these
windows
air
open. That is a problem. And retrofitting the windows to open might actually be a smarter solution. A KHN investigation found that more than 2,000 schools have spent millions of dollars for systems lured by air purifier companies' claims that experts say basically can't be, corroborated. And remember, people like Robert Redfield and a lot of the other Trump-era folks are rushing to be on the boards of these companies.
Oh.
Which should give you pause about, what the heck is going on here. Last summer, Global Plasma Solutions.
Oh,
just
yes.
make your classroom at the same heat as the sun, and you'll be fine. Last summer, Global Plasma Solutions wanted to test whether the company's air purifying devices could kill COVID-19, but could find only a lab using a chamber the size of a shoebox for its trials. In the company-funded study, the virus was blasted with 27,000 ions per cubic centimeter and 99% reduction of virus.
Good.
And the report doesn't say how the reduction was measured. And in September, the company's founder incidentally mentioned the devices being offered for sale will actually deliver a lot less ion power, maybe 13 times less, into a full-size room. But nonetheless, used the shoebox results in marketing this device heavily to schools as something could combat COVID in classrooms far larger than a shoebox. School officials, desperate to calm worried parents, bought these devices and others with a flood of federal funds, installing them in more than 2,000 schools across 44 states. They use the same technology that the Lancet COVID-19 Commission recently deemed often unproven and potential sources of pollution themselves. Now, I have to add, you also have the scam of the so-called deep cleaning.
Ah, yes.
Right? Remember, this is an airborne disease.
Yes. That did take off before we were totally convinced of that, but yeah, it stuck around. I mean,
it stuck
cleaning,
around. That's the
makes
thing.
sense,
They didn't
right?
stop doing
Cleaning.
it. There are libraries that still isolate your books for 3 days before they put it back in the library for no good reason except that's what they do.
Yes, well, they're bad books. I would do it too.
All books.
Oh,
so it's just weird. Now, some of them actually produce ozone, which itself is a pollutant and can help to trigger asthma.
Hey, thanks for the help.
There are issues. And so while you're doing them, again, don't blame the schools, blame the hype. But we're still not back to the place where people are like doing normal, reasonable things. They're still trying to do the industrial equivalent of injecting bleach and shining lights inside your body.
Yeah, well, don't do those. I know that, but yeah, I've run into this this ionizer solution, dealing with reopening a building, one that has no windows that open, and two that is not that's a rental and in a place that has like condo associations, so you have to go through all sorts of red tape to retrofit windows. I don't think they would let you. So okay, so what do you do? But I absolutely have seen that pitch, and and I don't know what to do with this stuff, because our own HVAC contractor is sending estimates for how much would it cost to install such a thing, unsolicited. But I'm supposed to trust you. Pollen. You're like the local AC guy. Why are you doing this to me?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's that time of year where I wake up in the morning, sneeze, and just after I sneeze, my phone lights up. And it's like, my sneeze was so powerful, it turned on my iPhone. No, actually, it's the alert coming that today is a high pollen day. I knew that already. That's right. I just sneezed. You're telling me after the fact, not before the fact.
Maybe it's just triggered by the sneeze. It's a smartphone. Maybe. It heard you.
Right. Anyway, so the pandemic is still raging around the world. Of course, India is in horrible shape. Germany is having a resurgence to the point where they've started new lockdowns. I'll tell you how bad it is in Germany. Oktoberfest was just canceled for the second year in a row.
Oktoberfest? It's May. But they have to make the beer in May for Oktoberfest, don't they?
This is per Bavarian Premier Söder and Munich München Mayor Reiter. Okay. So, you got to watch these things and see how that happens. Let's talk a little bit about the J&J pause. This is a new report. This is actually going to be a peer-reviewed. This is a preprint, meaning it hasn't been peer-reviewed yet. Reported awareness of the pause of J&J vaccine in the U.S. was very high, but may not have influenced COVID vaccine enthusiasm.
I have something for that.
So here that is. Attitudes toward COVID-19 vaccines and Johnson & Johnson temporary pause. If you were able to choose when to get a COVID vaccine, would you get it? Well, before the Johnson & Johnson pause, 43% were already vaccinated, during 48%, and now we're up to 52% after Johnson & Johnson resumes.
Right, okay.
Would you get it as soon as possible? 17% before, 12% during, 11% after. That's because the more enthusiastic people are going ahead and getting it. Here are the more important numbers. After, at least some people I know get it, 10% before, 9% during, 7% after. After, most people I know, 12% for, 11% during, 12% after. That has not changed. Would not get the COVID vaccine, 18% before, 20% during, and 18% after. That's the important one. So if you're looking to see what number of people are going to refuse the vaccine altogether, this study has it about 18%, unchanged before Johnson & Johnson pause. Kaiser Family Foundation has it at about 15%. And there's yet a third poll, which also I think Axios has done, which has it at, let's see, I'll pull it up, will not get,
1,000%.
is about in the 11 to 12% range. So, Axios breaks it down by generation, by sex, by race, by politics, by geography. And basically, if you're a rural Republican, you will not get the vaccine. About 16 to 22% will not get. So the important point is it's not 30, it's not 50. It's 15, 17, 18%, something like that. And that was always the case. And it's always going to be the case. Yeah. And you don't necessarily need everybody to get the vaccine to be where you need to be, as Ashish Jha was talking about. If you need to get to 50% of the population or 65% of adults, it's okay that 10 to 15 to 20% refuse, as long as you get everybody else.
Yeah. I mean, that's
right. Again, we've used this before, but it's the analogy about trying to get voters.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, you're never going to get MAGA people.
Right.
That's not your goal. Your goal is to get 51%. Your goal is to get your own base plus anybody else who you could persuade. So persuasion works. Persuasion's important. The fact that you cannot convince the MAGA people to agree with you is notable but irrelevant, because that's not who anything you do or any action you take is aimed at. It never is. It never was.
Okay. Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I worry about it every once in a while, just when I think about things like this is where we measured birtherism as starting off, and then we got a birther president somehow out of it. But he had to disavow his birtherism in order to get in, and then he didn't do anything about it once he got there.
Perfect storm.
Yeah. Okay.
You have Russia. You have running against a female. It was a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Right. He was a birther when he ran against Biden, and he lost.
Yes.
And he lost in the popular vote, actually fairly large, and the electoral college, yada yada.
Both
he
times,
still lost.
Yeah. Okay.
So
Sure.
the background there really is looking at the wait and see people. That's really what's most important, and these generational numbers are important. Whenever I get around to it, boomers 2%,
They were in a
wait
rush.
and see 15%,
Okay.
and will not get 11%. Those are the ones who haven't gotten it yet.
Okay.
So they're not la-di-da about it. They're not, sort of, oh, well, whatever. Very few boomers are like that. But when you're looking at Gen Z, whenever I get around to it, 30%.
Yeah, there we go.
Wait and see, 30%, 31%. And will not get, it's the same 11% as the boomers. Okay. So the analogy I saw that I think works
They're
for
living
me
at home.
is looking at movies.
Oh.
Did you ever watch a movie at home on demand?
Yes.
What service
feels
do
like
you
a
use?
trap. Why? I don't know.
What service
on
do you
demand.
use?
Have I used an on demand
Do you use
one?
Do you use Netflix? Do you use HBO?
Oh, that. Yeah, sure. That counts as on demand. Yes, Netflix. I definitely have used.
Okay,
that.
Netflix. Netflix
All right.
is a perfect example, right? So, did you watch like a big movie or a popular movie on Netflix?
Probably not.
Ever?
I'm sure I have. Either on that or on the HBO.
But you didn't go to the theater. You saw it on
Right.
Netflix.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Okay, we've done that. I saw like what? I don't know. Wonder Woman that way.
Whatever.
comes
Okay,
to
Wonder
mind.
Woman. So instead of going to the theater,
Yes.
you saw it on Netflix, yes?
I saw it on. Well, not when I saw it on HBO.
Does that make you Hollywood hesitant?
Yeah. No.
No.
Whenever
you just
I get
did it
around
at your
to it.
convenience.
Okay, that's
you
right.
wanted to do it when you wanted to do it.
That's true. I'm not.
So if you
Hollywood-
don't line up at one of these mass vaccination
Okay.
sites with thousands of cars in the LA Coliseum,
I'm not a doubter.
and you prefer to wait until it's in your local public health department where there's only 30 people, or even in your own doctor's office, and then you'll get it, you're not vaccine hesitant.
That's right. Okay.
Any more than you were Hollywood hesitant because you didn't rush out to see Star Wars on the first day.
That I have not done that in many years.
But that doesn't mean you
yes.
don't like movies, or that you won't get around to seeing it at some point, or that all of those things.
Right. Well, Star Wars I've become more hesitant about, but okay.
Whatever, but the 17th iteration.
Yeah. Well,
But the point is
the booster I didn't want
that you
so
wouldn't
quickly.
say that you're anti-movie,
That's right.
or that
Unless-
you're movie hesitant,
is
or
there
that you're Hollywood
money in
hesitant.
it?
The fact
I would be
is
willing to.
that there are different reasons why different people don't get the vaccine right away. And some of it is convenience, and some of it is access, and some of it is attitude, and some of it is hesitancy, and some of it is refusal. Those are not the same. None of those are the same as the others.
I will buy that. That seems like a good point. Especially since that means I'm not anti-something. Hollywood.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that makes a good. I mean, I definitely do that all the time. I'll see that when it's on HBO.
exactly.
I'll see that. It looks good.
That doesn't mean that I'm not
I
going
would
to see
go.
it. It doesn't
And I
mean I
would-
refuse to see it.
I might even pay
I might even pay to see it.
just here in my house.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
So, again, looking at the generation, whenever I get around to it, boomers, 2%, Gen X, 8, millennials, 14, Gen Z, 30.
Netflixers. Yeah.
So
Download it
younger
later.
people are the ones that aren't vaccinated at this particular point in time, and younger people are the ones that will get around to it when they get around to it, and it's like voting.
I see.
They get around to it when they get around to it.
Okay.
And yet,
But they like the
the
convenience.
voting numbers for 2020 were the highest in decades for younger voters.
Well,
we know that surveys that just came out. So that's
certainly
all
part
wonderful.
of their culture too. Getting around to it when you get around to it doesn't even mean necessarily they're lackadaisical about it.
Exactly.
It's just they
Same
want
as vaccines.
This is how things are served up to them. They see movies when they come out, and because voting became a thing that you could do on various days, when I get my chance to vote, I'll vote. And boomers and that age are like, well, but voting is on election day. I have to do it. That's part of the boomer culture. That was always true. Or the movie's coming out. I must go to the theater to see it.
Right. And so, again, I want to bring all of this up.
All right.
Because you will see lots of dire reporting in the news about how people who want vaccines, the numbers are dropping. Now there's appointments everywhere. And it's terrible and it's horrible. And look at this. There's no lines. Mm-hmm. That's good, not bad.
Yeah. Well,
first of all, you already got the early adapters, the ones who wanted it.
Yeah.
And now we're moving into, okay, I'll get it around when it's convenient for me. And that's when you move from mass vaccination sites to walk-ins accepted.
Yeah. And that's
you don't need an appointment.
Somebody wants to do it that way.
To doing it in 17 different ways instead of one big way. Yes. This is where you do, okay, you're going to have it at your barbershop. You can get it at your church. You can have it in your doctor's office. You can have it at the pharmacies. The feds just put this new text thing in where you could, text, I think it's Get Vax. I mean, I can look up the exact number and words that you text. But you text it on your phone, and then it comes back with you at the pharmacies in your area that are offering it. I tried it. It worked. I got 3 pharmacies within 5 minutes of me that are doing this.
Yeah, we had to try it, too. And I guess I have one of those age groups coming back to the household. My son.
Yeah, so, this is all an interesting conversation, and put that in perspective in terms of the age group that you know best.
Yeah.
Right? But, and I'm looking at my own age group, the cohort that I know best, which is more millennial and less Gen Z. But, my youngest just got the first vaccine in California because it's the first time they were eligible, the first time they could.
Yeah.
And he doesn't have a car. You don't need it.
Drive through
just
one.
Like you don't need one in New York City. He drives but doesn't have a car. And so when the first site that was offered was the Oakland Coliseum for cars, he said, I think I'll get it some other. I'll wait. Not that I don't want it. Not that I'm not going to get it. But I'm not walking to the Oakland Coliseum. Yeah. Which you can do. I mean, you can take public transport there, but then walk there and then figure out how they're doing it for people not in cars.
Yeah, that's true. You have
but those days are over. You're not doing that now, right? And now you can have it in your own local pharmacy in 15 different ways.
And I guess that's how it'll happen.
And that's how he did
it. Guys. Yeah. My son's his school, they had a clinic, and they were all ready to roll their clinic out, and they had it scheduled for the day after they paused Johnson.
Well, it was going to be J&J, because if you're going to do a school clinic, you want the one and done, because you don't know when those kids scatter, whether you'll ever see them again.
And so they had it all set up, and then they paused it the day before the clinic. So now all those kids who were willing are standing around waiting, and then it became the end of the semester, and they all worried, if I get a shot and I have a reaction in the middle of finals, all right, I'll wait till I get home. So that's the decisions that were made, and now they're also very happy to come home and find out that they don't have to go to some mega Walmart place to get their vaccine the way we did, and they can go to the local pharmacy. And Johnson & Johnson's
it's much more
back.
Comfortable for people, and so you make it convenient, and people do it. Again, that's not vaccine hesitancy. It's actually looking at your choices and making some informed decisions.
Okay. They'll feel a lot better about that. Because honestly, if we turn this into avocado toast for them again, they won't get vaccinated. They'll be angry.
Right. With us. So long as you get your vaccine. Otherwise, you're pond scum. You can tell them I said so.
That's right. All you people who have been waiting to get it at your local pharmacy is why the housing markets have collapsed.
Exactly.
Somehow. This is your fault.
So I didn't know if I had like an hour's worth of material, but you know what? It's already 9:51.
It turns out that you did.
Look at that.
Well, you weren't here last week. I figured it would. I figured it would be tough to keep it.
Yeah, but that's last week's news. Although I have to say, Rudy is always relevant. Now, I'm going to give you the last piece, which is, and if you're not familiar with her, Purva Mandavili is a wonderful science reporter for the New York Times. New York Times has a lot of things wrong, including their politics, but the science coverage is actually pretty darn good.
Okay.
And this piece is called Reaching Herd Immunity is Unlikely in the U.S., Experts Now Believe. Widely circulating coronavirus variants and persistent hesitancy about vaccines will keep the goal out of reach. The virus is here to stay, but vaccinating the most vulnerable may be enough. And that's why we talked about you don't need to get everybody. You need to get 50%.
Yeah. I did. I saw that piece. That one was kind of interesting. Like, all right, we
in
may
other
not
words,
get to
it's
that
not
term,
going to go away.
but
The whole concept of herd immunity
this is
that
different.
people throw around on the internet by the armchair epidemiologists is once we reach it, the pandemic's gone. No, that's not what it means.
Yeah.
It means that when you have herd immunity, you're not likely to have a new pandemic. But the one you have may be stabilized. And that's why in some states that haven't been vaccinating, the numbers are going up. Yeah. And in some states that are, the numbers are going down. And so, Oregon's having a bigger problem than Connecticut right now. And so, we're going to see. So instead, the experts are coming to the conclusion that rather than making a long promised exit, and we didn't promise that, Trump promised that, the virus will most likely become a manageable threat that will continue to circulate in the U.S. for years to come, still causing hospitalizations and deaths, but in much smaller numbers. You know what that should remind you of? Seasonal flu.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you know what that's going to...
Pandemic flu comes, and then it becomes seasonal flu until the next pandemic changes the viral makeup.
Right.
And then the subsequent years are still there, but not that bad. That's what happens, and that shouldn't be a surprise.
So
now, how much smaller is uncertain. It depends in part about how much of the nation becomes vaccinated, but it's already clear that the virus is changing too quickly, new variants are spreading too easily, and vaccinations proceeding too slowly for herd immunity to be within reach anytime soon. So what that means is if you have herd immunity, then the virus that's there mutates, and then you have a new variant, and it's not as bad in your community. Mm-hmm. And without herd immunity, the virus mutates, it's there, and you can have a little bit of an outbreak. Mm-hmm. And that latter situation is probably where we're at. That may have contributed to what happened in Michigan. And that may be contributing to what's happening in Washington and Oregon right now.
Could be, right? Yeah,
the shift in outlook presents a new challenge for public health authorities. The drive for herd immunity captured the imagination of large segments of the public. I know that because all the armchair epidemiologists on Twitter were writing about it as if they're experts. Don't worry if you don't get vaccinated. We'll just all get sick and we'll have herd immunity. 580-some thousand deaths later, maybe that wasn't a good idea.
No.
Of course, we said so at the time, but, that's another story for another day. Right. To say the goal will not be attained adds another why bother to the list of reasons vaccine skeptics use to avoid being inoculated, but vaccinations remain the key to transforming the virus. Tony Fauci, the Biden administrator's top advisor on COVID-19, acknowledged the shift in experts' thinking. People were getting confused and thinking you're never going to get the infections down until you reach this mystical level of herd immunity, whatever that number is. And that's why we stopped using herd immunity in the classic sense. I'm saying forget that. You vaccinate enough people, the infections are going down. Or as we like to say in the trade, you're looking at community immunity. Just get it done. Get it in your community. Yeah. Don't worry about the rest of the country.
Yeah. And don't travel too much then.
Yeah. Once the novel coronavirus began to spread around the globe, it became increasingly clear the only way out would be for so many people to gain immunity through natural infection or vaccination. We don't know that they're the same. May be the same for 6 months to 9 months. That the virus would run out of people who infect. The concept of reaching herd immunity became the implicit goal in many countries, including the U.S., and that's one of the reasons why Sweden and Britain made bad choices early on.
Yeah.
Early on, the target herd immunity threshold was estimated to be 60 to 70%, and most experts, including Fauci, expected the U.S. would be able to reach it once vaccines were available. But as vaccines were developed, distribution ramped up, estimates of the threshold began to rise. That's because the initial calculations are based on the contagiousness of the original virus. The B117 variant, the British version, is about 60% more transmissible, and as a result, now you have to get to 80%. And if even more contagious variants develop, and keep an eye on India, or if scientists find that immunized people can still transmit the virus, we don't know that, but for the most part, that seems to be relatively rare, but we don't know that for sure yet, and that's still being looked at. The calculation will have to be revised upward again.
Oh.
Right? Now, polls show that about 30% of the U.S. population is still reluctant to be vaccinated, although that hardcore is closer to 15, as we talked about. Okay. That number is expected to improve, but probably not enough. Mark Lipsitch, who's an epidemiologist at Harvard, said we could get to 90% in theory, but not super likely.
Okay, yeah.
Right? So disease transmission is local. And there's this lovely map that I sent you, and this is where it's from, looking at individual states for the estimated share of adults who would definitely or probably get the vaccine. And it's really interesting when you look at that map. It's a blue and white map. Mm-hmm. It should stand out for you on your Skype feed.
Okay. Yeah,
but
I see.
If not, it's from this article here that I think I sent you, but I'll send you again.
Interesting. Wyoming is blank.
Yes, Wyoming
they all died.
And North Dakota don't want to get vaccinated. Whereas if you look at South Dakota, the center of the state doesn't want to get vaccinated, but the two sides, the left and the right, absolutely do. So it's like South Dakota's, despite Kristi Noem, South Dakota's defenses are crumbling.
Yeah. Well, that is interesting. And I just find
Next door, Minnesota, they want to get vaccinated.
Right.
There's a wall. You say virus can't cross borders? Well, look at this. Vaccinations in Minnesota, I want it. As soon as you cross over into North Dakota, don't touch me.
Yeah. Wyoming being blank is interesting because, of course, just in case you were wondering, we have already now killed enough people with COVID-19 to wipe out all of Wyoming. That isn't what happened.
Well, I look at it the other way. With Wyoming, there shouldn't be a problem. You only have to convince 19 more people, and that map changes blue.
That's true. Right. It's an easy task. They say they're not going to get it, but I think they're lying, and secretly they will.
One of the bluest places in the country, that would be Connecticut. Also, Vermont, Massachusetts, Rhode Island.
Where the virus costs.
Other studies say New Hampshire. So New England's doing great.
Okay. Yeah.
And Maryland and New Jersey are doing great. Virginia is a little less blue, although Northern Virginia is bluer than Southern Virginia.
Yes. Well, we all got it here. So, I can testify to that. This is interesting. I enjoyed that article. And I don't know, I think maybe even read it more and discuss more about it in the coming days. But thanks. I'm glad your computer shed its virus or whatever the hell was the problem. And
I got another one of those warnings there. So, it's day to day, but the tech's estimated should last 2 or 3 months before it dies. So hopefully my new one will get here. Okay. Anyway, great to be back, and I'll talk to you on Wednesday.
All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I feel like I skimmed through this article that we were just discussing with Greg, and I feel like if we had more time, I suppose we might have read through it more in depth. And you should read through it more in depth. And I might force you to read through it more in depth by reading it right here, right now. I'll save you the time. Maybe this is a big help to all of you. But I thought it was very helpful in explaining why the change in what actual experts are using in terms of their terminology, and a little bit a better understanding of what herd immunity is and isn't, which I think we all kind of got we got our armchair epidemiologist view of what it was all about. It was kind of a new term to many of us. I mean, we've used it before. And usually in discussions with Greg about pandemic flu, etc. By the way, speaking of which, it occurs to me that in the end, if this article's description of what might be likely in the absence of what actual epidemiologists might previously have called herd immunity, it's entirely possible that this thing gets reduced to something along the lines of the seasonal flu, at which point all the people who have been wrong all along about this thing just being the flu will then say, see, told you, we were right, it's just the flu. All it took to get there was 2 years of lockdowns, public mask wearing, 200 million people inoculated, etc., etc. But other than all of that, it's just the flu. Oh, and also 600,000 people dead. And I guess before we transition into the article, and I really think it is a valuable one, a minute on one of the things that I spent some time on late in the weekend was reminding everybody that we had passed this particular threshold. I've been warning you about it for a long time, and now we've gotten there. And one of the discussions over the weekend was about disputes about the numbers, but I think we're on pretty solid ground about the numbers. I've been tweeting it for a while. We're now there. There are more people more Americans have been killed by COVID-19 in approximately the last 1 year or so. I mean, it's a little bit longer than we've been seeing deaths from COVID-19. But basically, the last year, we've seen more Americans killed by COVID-19 than we have ever seen, in terms of numbers, of American forces, United States Armed Forces personnel killed in combat we've made comparisons. People said, well, it's been 10 Vietnams, or more people lost to COVID than World War II and World War I combined. We've now passed the point where more Americans have died of COVID-19 than American forces killed in combat in every military engagement in the history of the United States, from Lexington and Concord on. Like the whole thing, the entirety of the Revolutionary War, the entirety of World War I, World War II, and yes, the Civil War. Now, I had some pushback from some people who said, well, now the Civil War, 800,000 people were estimated to have died in the Civil War. How dare you, something, what a liar you are, and don't you do this, how dare you. And by the way, it was presented in light of, well, I'm on your side, you see, politically speaking, and on the subject of the pandemic as well, and you don't need to embellish things and make us look like liars. But I was very specific about this. So I actually had to, endure somebody spending their entire afternoon insisting that it was very, very wrong to think that Confederate soldiers who were killed in the Civil War were not United States Armed Forces personnel, and that my failure to count them as United States Armed Services personnel was what was accounting for my lie, you see, about how many people, the comparison with how many people had died of COVID-19. But I think everybody else in the world understood pretty clearly, yeah, when I say United States forces, when it comes to the Civil War, Confederates, I mean, it basically was a misreading of what was being stated. The guy's argument was, well, how dare you say that they weren't Americans? Well, I didn't say they weren't Americans. I said they weren't U.S. Armed Forces personnel. And neither did they think they were U.S. Armed Forces personnel. Were North Carolinians, this person was from North Carolina. In fact, can we even say, were North Carolinians who fought for the Confederacy at the time, were they Americans? Well, debatable. They were saying that they were not, residents of the United States of America, but they were Confederate States of America. I'm sure they thought of themselves as Americans. And so did Lincoln think of them as Americans. We're fighting this war because these particular group of Americans have this mistaken idea that they can secede from the Union, and they cannot. So, were South or North Carolinians serving in the Confederate Armed Forces Americans? Debatable. Were they United States Armed Forces? Not debatable. Resounding no. They just were not. They would have told you they were not. United States Armed Forces certainly would have told you they were not, and they're not counted that way. So anyway, this person, though, was pretty sure that everything was wrong still because I had gotten the numbers from Wikipedia, notoriously wrong, and anyone can change it, and don't you know how Wikipedia works? But of course, one of the ways Wikipedia works, given that anybody can change it at any time, is that you have to provide your sources. And there was a source provided for the number of U.S. Armed Forces killed in the Civil War. And the source is the United States Department of Veterans Affairs. And, they could make mistakes. They could be wrong. But I haven't seen any other figure for it that contradicts what they had to say about the number of U.S. personnel, United States Armed Forces personnel lost in the Civil War, 140,414. If you know differently, let me know. Anyway, if you go to the infamous Wikipedia and add it all up, and I mean, they have everything. They have every horrible, horrific, probably illegal Indian war in there. They have every minor engagement, the way we think of it. They've got all the major wars, etc. All the best, all the major wars, all the really good ones, plus some of the bad ones. that we lost because of John McCain or whatever. But that's the news. 590,386 U.S. armed forces lost since 75 in combat, not including disease losses, etc., etc., those wounded who died later. There's a very specific kind of count. And we are well past that and past 591,000 currently, according to Worldometers, and looking to move on to 592,000. And in case you were wondering, what if we did throw the Confederates in there? The total would be 684,386, and get back to me in a couple months and you'll find that we're probably there too. Why? Because what we're learning in the New York Times today. Back to the article entitled, Reaching Herd Immunity, in scare quotes, reaching herd immunity is unlikely in the U.S., experts now believe. And a lot of people tweeting this around. The reason I want to read through this is a lot of people tweeting this article around with, heavy sighs and, oh my God, we're effed. WITF, as they say, starting now. But it's not that bad. And you have to read through and understand the nuance of it. Widely circulating coronavirus variants and persistent hesitancy, bad things, right, about vaccines, will keep the goal out of reach. But it's not so bad. This is the subheader here. The virus is here to stay, but vaccinating the most vulnerable may be enough to restore normalcy. And I guess the real takeaway here is, yes, we may never be rid of this coronavirus, but with enough vaccination, vaccinating the right people, we'll get to the point where it really will be something like the flu. People will get it. Some people will get it and go to the hospital. Some people will get it and go to the hospital and die. Some vulnerable people, vulnerable Americans will get remdesivir for free or not. Younger kids, it'll happen to everybody, but it'll happen at a rate that you'll finally be right in saying, well, it's like the flu. And in a related article, by the way, you remember when Donald Trump used to try to duck responsibility for doing anything about the coronavirus and being an effective advocate for tamping it out in any way that we could. He used to say, well, did you know that 60,000 people sometimes each year die from the flu? And remember, for a while, the short-lived attempt to say, but Obama, swine flu. And remember, that was 12,000 dead. I mean, who wouldn't take 12,000 dead right now versus the 590-something we're dealing with right now? But, yeah, that was his dodge for a long, long time. It's like the flu. The flu kills 60,000 people. Well, by the way, while you were all washing your hands, staying home, and wearing masks, the flu season this time around killed about 600 people. Not 600,000, 600. 60,000, that's a bad, bad year. Divide that by 10, right? We're 10 times better. We did 6,000. Now, we did 100 times better. 600 people died of the flu. I saw people tweeting that around were saying, I'm wearing a mask next winter no matter what, coronavirus or no. Why are we doing this? Why do we allow ourselves to get sick? And, of course, all the conservatives running around, mask culture, you're all sheep. We're being enslaved, and you don't know it. Whatever happened to these fiscal types who used to say they were conservatives? What about our productivity? I mean, first of all, we all learned to work remotely, which, I guess we all thought there was going to be a huge drop off in productivity, but there really wasn't one. And we learned all sorts of new ways to work and unfortunately, new ways to work around the clock 24/7. So what has that done to productivity? But you're not losing people to sick days. And even if they did get sick, I don't know if they were knocked on their ass completely by COVID or killed by it, can't really avoid that. Can't come to work today, I'm dead. That definitely works as an excuse. But even people who got sick, whether it was from a cold or a flu or anything else, if you're working from home and working remotely, there's very little excuse for not getting at least some of what you were supposed to get done. Yeah, I might have to take a nap in the middle of the day. Sorry, I am sick. I'm telling you what's going on. But not only can you get your work done, but you can get your work done without endangering anyone else in the office. How many people have come to the office? It's just a cold, whatever. I'm taking, I'm drinking Theraflu. Well, you're drinking Theraflu, not Theracold. You're giving us You're giving away the game here. But then you make everybody else in the office sick, and then they can't come in and do their work. And that was the whole point of the whole pandemic thing. It wasn't necessarily that everybody who got touched by this virus was going to die. It's that you were going to be taken out of action for possibly 3 weeks at a time, and whole industries were going to close because nobody could stand on 2 feet to work that day. We did a great job in avoiding that. And what may happen here in this article, we should just get to it, right, is that we get to a point where it's like, all right, not only have we immunized enough people that the numbers of cases are lower, and not only have we given people a 95% chance that even if they get coronavirus, it won't be serious and they won't have to be hospitalized for it. It does reduce it something to the level of the annoyance of the flu. We'll all be able to do the things we were saying we wanted to do all this year, and some people will get sick and it won't be terrible. So here's the article, right? Early in the pandemic, when vaccines for the coronavirus were still just a glimmer on the horizon, the term herd immunity came to signify the end game, the point when enough Americans would be protected from the virus so we could be rid of the pathogen and reclaim our lives. Now, more than half of adults in the United States have been inoculated with at least one dose of a vaccine. But daily vaccination rates are slipping, and there's widespread consensus among scientists and public health experts that the herd immunity threshold is not attainable, at least not in the foreseeable future, and perhaps not ever. But as Greg was explaining, maybe we were thinking of herd immunity as the wrong thing. The disappearance of the virus, like wiping it out like smallpox, might not be what we're after here, but turning it into, well, it sucks, and some people die, and maybe some years 60,000 people die, but it is kind of more like just the flu now. That's different, right? And you can have a flu epidemic without having a flu pandemic. Lots of people got it, just not industry-wide shutdowns. So, where were we here? Instead, they are coming to the conclusion, the people who see that in the foreseeable future, or perhaps not ever, is the disease eradicated. They are coming to the conclusion rather than making a long-promised exit, the virus will most likely become a manageable threat that will continue to circulate in the United States for years to come, still causing hospitalizations and deaths, but in much smaller numbers. In fact, you might say flu-like numbers. How much smaller is uncertain and depends in part on how much of the nation and the world becomes vaccinated and how the coronavirus evolves. It's already clear, however, that the virus is changing too quickly, and new variants are spreading too easily, and vaccination is proceeding too slowly for herd immunity to be within reach anytime soon. Continued immunizations, especially for people at highest risk because of age, exposure, or health status, will be crucial to limiting the severity of outbreaks, if not their frequency, experts believe. So in other words, it could always be around, or at least always in season, be around, but just not kill enough people for us to panic the way we had to this time, and instead only panic the amount that we sometimes panic when we have a particularly bad strain of flu, and some people who don't always get flu shots decide to get one. The virus is unlikely to go away, said Rustam Antia. Best pronunciation stab I can offer you, an evolutionary biologist at Emory University in Atlanta. But we want to do all we can to check that it's likely to become a mild infection, turn it into the flu. The shift in outlook presents a new challenge for public health authorities. The drive for herd immunity by the summer, some experts once thought possible, captured the imagination of large segments of the public. To say the goal will not be attained adds another why bother to the list of reasons that vaccine skeptics use to avoid being inoculated. Yet, vaccinations remain key to transforming the virus into a controllable threat, experts said. And your favorite and mine, Dr. Anthony Fauci, the Biden administration's top advisor on COVID-19, acknowledged the shift in experts' thinking. People were getting confused and thinking you're never going to get the infections down until you reach this mystical level of herd immunity, whatever that number is, he said. That's why we stopped using herd immunity in the classic sense. I'm saying, forget that for a second. You vaccinate enough people, the infections are going to go down. And we are seeing that. And in my daily monitoring of it, I see not only lower numbers, but a lower rate of increase in most states. And even some states that I thought were in serious trouble and were going to stay in serious trouble, people that are on the top 10 list in terms of new cases daily, the rate at which they are increasing is decreasing, and they are in danger, I guess, eventually of falling off the list. But even places like that aren't, considered to have had the most robust COVID-19 responses, Nebraska, Oklahoma, Arkansas, Utah, etc., that are high on the list in terms of infections per capita, etc., things like that, are growing slowly enough that they might be able to drop out of pandemic mode fairly soon. I'll see if I can explain that better sometime in the future. But let me continue with this article. Why reaching the threshold is tough is this next section here. Once the novel coronavirus began to spread across the globe in early 2020, it became increasingly clear that the only way out of the pandemic would be for so many people to gain immunity, whether natural infection or vaccination, and Greg warned about all of that, that the virus would run out of people to infect. The concept of reaching herd immunity became the implicit goal in many countries, including the United States, maybe. Early on, the target herd immunity threshold was estimated to be about 60 to 70% of the population. And remember that we were basically telling everybody at the time, well, when people were saying, well, why bother with vaccines? Let's all just get it. We'll have COVID parties, and then we'll reach that 60 to 70%. The reminder was, well, gee whiz. At the time, we had about 300,000 something people dead, and a little under 5% of the population had been infected. You want to infect 70% of the population at that rate of fatality? That's an enormous risk, to put things gently. You're a genocidal maniac would be a better way of expressing what we were possibly facing at that point. Anyway, as vaccines were developed and distribution ramped up through the winter and into the spring, estimates of the threshold began to rise. Remember, because we were having variants being passed around that were more infectious, etc., etc. And so the estimate, right, you don't need more than 60 to 70% immunized in one way or another. As a result, experts now calculate the herd immunity threshold to be about at least 80%. And remember, that was always discussed too. We don't know at what level we have to find immunity in one way or another among the general population in order to slow this thing down. It could be 60%, it could be 80%. In fact, right, Greg mentioned on the way out, it's theoretically possible we could get to about 90% vaccine coverage, but not super likely. But that might be what it takes to keep things under control. Though resistance to the vaccine is a main reason the United States is unlikely to reach herd immunity, it's not the only one. Herd immunity is often described as a national target, but it's a hazy concept in a country this large. Disease transmission is local, right? We learned about that. If the coverage is 95% in the United States as a whole, but 70% in some small town, the virus doesn't care. It will make its way around the small town. It goes and eats the low-hanging fruit, as I have said in a couple of occasions before now. How insulated a particular region is from the coronavirus depends on a dizzying array of factors. Herd immunity can fluctuate with population crowding, human behavior, sanitation, and all sorts of other things, said Dr. David M. Morens, a virologist and senior advisor to Dr. Fauci. The herd immunity for a wealthy neighborhood might be X. Then you go into a crowded neighborhood 1 block away, and it's 10X. Or you might go to a place that is relatively thinly populated and where they haven't experienced a tremendous amount of difficulty with the virus, and then you have a gigantic motorcycle rally the size of the entire state in one city, and they stay there for a month drinking. Now you got 10X. Given the degree of movement among regions, a small virus wave in a region with a low vaccination level can easily spill over into an area where a majority of the population is protected. At the same time, the connectivity between countries particularly as travel restrictions ease, emphasizes the urgency of protecting not just Americans, but everyone in the world, said Natalie E. Dean, a biostatistician at the University of Florida in Gainesville. Any variants that arise in the world will eventually reach the United States, she noted. Many parts of the world lag far behind the United States on vaccinations. Less than 2% of the people in India have been fully vaccinated, for example, and less than 1% of South Africa, according to data compiled by the New York Times. We will not achieve herd immunity as a country or a state or even as a city until we have enough immunity in the population as a whole, said Lauren Ansel Myers, the director of the COVID-19 Modeling Consortium at the University of Texas at Austin. What will the future hold? Let's see. What it may hold is, if the herd immunity threshold is not attainable, what matters most is the rate of hospitalizations and deaths after pandemic restrictions are relaxed, experts believe. By focusing on vaccinating the most vulnerable, the United States has already brought those numbers down sharply. If the vaccination levels of that group continue to rise, the expectation is that over time the coronavirus may become seasonal, like the flu, and affect mostly the young and healthy. Terrific. Isn't that great if you're young and healthy to find out you're the next target, but you're the last ones left who haven't been vaccinated, I guess. But yeah. And then, of course, like I said, Trumps will be running around saying, we're right, it is the flu, it's seasonal, it disappears in the warm weather. Just like I said it would before 500,000 people got killed. Well, and we had a warp speed vaccination program, which I didn't help with. Anyway, what we want to do at the very least is to get to the point where we have just really sporadic little flare-ups, said Carl Bergstrom, an evolutionary biologist at the University of Washington in Seattle. That would be a very sensible target in this country where we have an excellent vaccine and the ability to deliver it. Over the long term, a generation or two, the goal is to transition the new coronavirus to become more like its cousins that cause common colds. That would mean the first infection is early in childhood and subsequent infections are mild because of partial protection, even if immunity wanes. Some unknown proportion of people with mild cases may go on to experience debilitating symptoms for weeks or months, a syndrome called long COVID, but they are unlikely to overwhelm the healthcare system. And remember, that was the original goal, right? Even in lockdown mode, we were saying this isn't going to make the virus disappear. It's simply meant to flatten the curve. Remember, we haven't talked about flattening the curve in about a year now. The vast majority of the mortality and of the stress on the healthcare system comes from people with a few particular conditions, especially people who are over 60, Dr. Lipsitch said. If we can protect those people against severe illness and death, then we will have turned COVID from a society disruptor to a regular infectious disease. If communities maintain vigilant testing and tracking, something, by the way, Trump still insists, no, we should not be doing. But if they maintain vigilant testing and tracking, it may be possible to bring the number of new cases so low, how low? So low that health officials can identify any new introduction of the virus and immediately stifle a potential outbreak, said Barry Pradelsky, an economist, of all people, of all professions, I guess, at the National Center for Scientific Research in Grenoble, France. Grenoble. I don't know. You tell me how you pronounce it. He and his colleagues described this strategy in a paper published on Thursday, you see, in the scientific journal The Lancet. Le Lancet. I don't know. What is it in French? Eradication is, I think, impossible at this stage, the doc says, but you want local elimination. Vaccination is still the key, is our last section here. The endpoint has changed, but the most pressing challenge remains the same. Persuading as many people as possible to get the shot. Reaching a high level of immunity in the population is not like winning a race, Dr. Lipsitch said. I'm sure he's really happy about how I just pronounced that, but my alarm was going off and I got distracted. Sorry, Doc. You have to then feed it. You have to keep vaccinating to stay above that threshold. skepticism about the vaccines among Americans and lack of access in some groups, homeless populations, migrant workers, some communities of color, for instance, of course, make it a challenge to achieve that goal. And that is difficult. Vaccine mandates would only make that stance worse, some experts believe. A better approach would be for a trusted figure to address the root cause of the hesitancy. You know all about that. You just have to identify the right person for it and get them to do it, see if it works. People often need to see others in their social circle embracing something before they're willing to try it. This all makes perfectly good common sense, I think, and really basically brings us to the end of the article and the end of this segment. We'll be right back after these 2 minutes with more. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. Makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, yeah, so as I said, I think basically the balance, and it was just a couple of paragraphs, of the New York Times piece was about vaccine hesitancy and how you might be able to convince more people to get vaccinated. But the main thrust of the piece was that it's entirely possible that what you should be talking about, the kind of herd immunity you should be looking for, is perhaps not one that eradicates the disease in this country or worldwide or anything of the sort, but rather one which means that you are likely to see seasonal outbreaks, kind of like the flu, and no, that doesn't really mean that they were right that it was the flu to begin with. It becomes the flu through our action against it, tamping down on the numbers, tamping down on the transmission until we can work out a vaccine that gets us to a place that looks like natural herd immunity and functions the same way from, I guess, pre-vaccine days. But I mean, the entire practice of vaccination. But, you know, millions of people would have died along the way in a few short years had we not gone this other route. But eventually you want to turn it into something. It's not the flu now, but we could make it into the flu with a rush vaccine program. And we can only get through this rush vaccine program and make, and deal with it if we distance and mask and wash hands and stay home as much as possible. Then that's the only way we can make it to through the year it will take, if we're lucky, to get to a vaccine. And remember, then we didn't know if we could develop something in a year or not. It could have been several years before we got to that. And then with the vaccine, we can turn it into something more akin to the flu, where, yeah, in a terrible year with a weird variant that we didn't anticipate, 60,000 people could die. But since in some stages we were losing 60,000 people in a month. So, and of course, who knows what's going to happen in India in the next couple of weeks. However, even if we do turn it into the flu, I mean, I don't think we're going to be able to keep people this vigilant. But if you were this vigilant against the flu, you would have a result like we read about in Scientific American in the last couple of days. Flu has disappeared worldwide during the COVID pandemic. The public health measures that slow the spread of the novel coronavirus work really well on influenza. And of course, they were the ones always recommended by the people who do deal with pandemic flu. And I don't know, maybe that was the basis from which some people, but probably not Donald Trump, said things like, well, it is the flu. Well, why do you say that? Well, it's communicable, and you can avoid it in the same ways that you would otherwise avoid the flu. Yes, that's true, but you never do anything to avoid the flu, so we really don't want to take your advice about how to avoid these things.
Sorry.
All right. Okay, well, let's not overdo it. But okay, since the novel coronavirus began its global spread, I'm reading here from Katie Peak in Scientific American. We'll just give you the gist of it. Since the novel coronavirus began its global spread, influenza cases reported to the World Health Organization have dropped to minuscule levels. The reason epidemiologists think is the public health measures taken to keep the coronavirus from spreading also stop the flu. Influenza viruses are transmitted in much the same way as the SARS-CoV-2, but they are less effective at jumping from host to host. As Scientific American reported last fall, the drop-off in flu numbers was both swift and universal. Since then, cases have stayed remarkably low. There is just no flu circulating, says Greg Poland, who has studied the disease at the Mayo Clinic for decades. The U.S. saw about 600 deaths from influenza during the 2020-2021 flu season. 600. Amazing, right? Remember when it was 60,000? Who you even knew? Who could have known that? Except for people who, read newspapers. In comparison, the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention estimated there were roughly 22,000 deaths in the prior flu season and 34,000 2 seasons ago. So, that's kind of basically it. What more do you need to know? You know what the measures were. You know it was masking and distancing and hand washing. And also that Greg tells you to do that he doesn't tell us to mask every year necessarily, although he might from now on. But he probably thought, 1, he couldn't get you to do it, and 2, everybody would feel funny about it, and 3, were there enough masks, etc. No one knew what to do. But hand washing, they've always told us that one. Anyway, so with that in mind, okay, so now if we do turn it into the flu, there's still more you can do. You can turn it into the flu and then beat that too. But, something, freedom, you can't have it, yada, yada, masks make you into sheep. All right, whatever. Let's see, other things that I had that are actually virus related that I thought might be of some interest. Maybe we just make a note of this, because I think we've all had an inkling about this for some time, too. The Washington Post reporting many police officers, everyone's favorite, police officers spurn coronavirus vaccines as departments hold off on mandates. We discussed some time ago the difficulty with a mandate with vaccinating members of the armed forces, which seemed like a little bit counterintuitive. You should be able to, feels like you should be able to order them to do such things. And really police too. And given how excited so many police forces are about being militarized, perhaps we should force some of the militarization on them that they maybe wouldn't be fans of. But no, we haven't done so far. Low immunization levels suggest a hesitancy is pervasive, posing risks to public safety. And it's been a problem for a long time. Cops were getting coronavirus left and right, and were very hesitant also to do the proper masking that they needed to do. I don't know whether they saw it as a machismo thing or what, but I don't know. The vaccine hesitant are, they're hesitant about everything. They think everybody's out to get them, including viruses. So they're pulling guns on people, pulling guns on viruses. I don't know what we're giving them all this protective gear for. They won't wear it. Although, it's funny. I give them a mask as protective gear. They won't wear it because that's not cool or macho. It makes me look like I'm afraid of something. Give them a bulletproof vest and they can't wait to wear it because it looks cool and tactical, even though, whatever. It should make it look like you're afraid of something, which you should be. You should be afraid of getting shot. And they are. And so that's why they keep shooting people. If I kill them first, they can't kill me. That's, I guess, the thinking. All right. Well, let's see. Who's written this piece here? Isaac Stanley Becker wrote this piece. Let's get a couple of paragraphs from it and see if there's anything new and surprising here. Police officers were among the first frontline workers to gain priority access to the coronavirus vaccines, but their vaccination rates are lower than or about the same as those of the general public, according to data made available by some of the nation's largest law enforcement agencies. The reluctance of police to get the shots threatens not just their own health, but also the safety of the people they're responsible for guarding, monitoring, and patrolling and killing, experts say. At the Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department, just 39% of employees have gotten at least one dose, officials said, compared to more than 50% of eligible adults nationwide. In Atlanta, 36% of sworn officers have been vaccinated, and a mere 28% of those employed by the Columbus Division of Police, Ohio's largest police department, report having received a shot. I think it's unacceptable. Joe Lombardo, the head of the Las Vegas Police and Sheriff of Clark County, said of the meager demand for the shots within his force. Well, then don't accept it. Force it on them. The numbers paint a troubling picture of policing and public health because officers have high rates of diabetes, heart disease, and other conditions, which is also bad news. Their hesitancy puts them at greater risk of serious illness from the coronavirus while also undermining force readiness, experts said. Police officers were more likely to die of COVID-19 last year than all other causes combined, including the fear of getting shot by nasty bad guys, according to data compiled by the National Law Enforcement Officers Memorial Fund, the people who track cops who die and why. Interesting. And they would come to that conclusion. So, there's your basic setup, essentially. Police were more likely to die of COVID, which they didn't believe in and said was a hoax, and also, by the way, more likely to shoot and kill people of color all the time because they were pretty sure that they were totally under assault by organized killers and Antifa and BLM. That they believed. Coronavirus, they didn't. I don't know what to tell you. They seem to have everything upside down and backwards, these guys. All right, you get the idea, and there's some flirtation with the idea of making the vaccines mandatory, but I don't know what, let's see, what sorts of obstacles stand in the way. One solution is for departments to make vaccinations compulsory, according to experts in bioethics and public health, just as some healthcare settings and institutions of higher education have begun doing. But department leaders and union officials said in interviews that such requirements could backfire or lead to lengthy litigation. Of more than 40 major metropolitan police departments contacted by the Post, none had made vaccination compulsory for employees. That reflects a belief among officers and their unions that getting a shot is a private decision. I mean, I guess so, but if you want to wear a public gun, I think, whatever. Maybe a little safety minded. But, but we've never demanded that of our police. Here you go. The most dangerous thing you could possibly carry into a crowd that you'll be patrolling. Use it well. Sure. I mean, that's the permission we give you. But be safe and try to do no harm, especially to people that you have no, interactions with whatsoever, just walking around and infecting them. I mean, I guess it would be like giving them a gun that just accidentally goes off once in a while. I'm walking around, somebody got shot. I didn't shoot him, the gun went off. Nothing I can do about it. Get them a better gun. Get them immunized. Whatever. Or make it mandatory. Mandatory, no more of these guns that go off all the time. Got to have one of the ones that you have to pull a trigger for. Okay? Okay. Well, somehow they might even agree to that one. Well, let's see. I hate to sound like I don't care, but I really don't. Vince Champion, the Atlanta-based Southeast Regional Director for the International Brotherhood of Police Officers, said of low vaccination rates, "It's a personal decision. We fight the virus every day. We're out among every disease in the world." All right, well then give me back your vest. I mean, you'll get shot a lot more and you'll die a lot more, but I hate to sound like I really don't care, but I really don't. But I can't say that because I'm not Vince Champion, which sounds like maybe a little bit of a fake name. Just throw that one out there. Authorities in roughly half of the departments from Philadelphia to Houston to San Francisco were not even tracking how many of their officers were protected, but they know how many wear vests. That baffled Chris Cosgriff, executive director of the Officer Down Memorial Page, which honors law enforcement officers killed in the line of duty. And I guess next time I get a solicitation phone call for officers, who've died and I want a contribution, I'll say they should have got vaccinated. Sorry, can't help you. Commanders should know whether officers are vulnerable to getting sick and potentially dying, he said. It's a readiness issue. Yeah, I would think you'd be, interested in that. But I guess not. Whatever. They then go on to say hesitancy within the departments is rooted in some of the same concerns expressed by the general public. So you know what they are, and we don't have to explain them, I guess. Let's see. Some differences in police uptake in the vaccine reflect disparities among the communities they serve. Hawaii, where 80% of officers in Honolulu have received at least one dose, has administered more doses per capita than all but 4 states. And the Democratic governor, David, how does he pronounce his last name? I don't know the governor of Hawaii. I-G-E. Sorry, governor. I don't know much about you. Well, he's moved forward with plans for certifications known as vaccine passports. Uh-oh, look out. A cousin of vaccine mandates. I think we all know about the passports. Greater proportion of residents in Denver County are vaccinated than in, for example, Clark County, which includes Las Vegas, or Fulton County, which includes Atlanta. So there's a chart here about police departments and their vaccination rates. 80% in Honolulu, 69%, nice, in Denver. Boston, 63%. Baltimore, 59%. D.C., 56%. And then on down to where the ones where it's in the minority. L.A., 50%. Detroit, 45%. New York, 39%. Las Vegas, 38%. Atlanta, 36%. Columbus, 28%. Phoenix, Arizona. Don't hang out with the cops in Phoenix, Arizona. 23%. Smaller cities report even lower rates of police vaccination, right? Barney Fife didn't get his shot. Just 20% of officers in Mobile, Alabama have been vaccinated. And any more? Well, that of course, the rest of the paragraph is about who they asked about that. You can find out about that on your own. I want to run through the rest of this article. Anything else we got here? Well, not too much. Between clinics run at the city's crime lab and a sheriff's department training facility, 69% of Denver's public safety department has been vaccinated. That's among the highest in among the big cities. That's not an accident, the chief said. They didn't just trip and fall into people with the needles. By the time those vaccine clinics opened, he said, his officers had learned about mRNA, the technology behind the Moderna and Pfizer shots, and seen a video of the union president discussing his experience in the trial. I would do it again, the union president, Nick Rogers, said in the video, which was provided to the Post. Meanwhile, the other union president said, I don't even care. I'm so tough, I don't care if cops die, except when cops die, I'm going to cry about it if they die from things that make me upset, like Black Lives Matter or maybe fake Antifa cement milkshakes. I'm a little bit down on the cops this morning, I guess. All right. Well, there's a lot more to it. It's a long article and very interesting as background reading, but doesn't feel like we're paying enough attention to some of the other things that we really should get to. But, the fact that the coronavirus is still with us is difficult and upsetting, to say the least. I will at least acknowledge the existence of this article in The Guardian, which I feel like reading, but maybe I'll do that on my own time. I feel like there may be some parallel to what's happening in India to what happened here. And I think eventually the parallel will, the Indian situation will likely overwhelm the American situation. But reminder, as they've spiked terribly in India, but they're still far behind what we've done to ourselves with our idiot president. And this comes to mind again because of the headline I'm looking at in The Guardian, which is, "We are witnessing a crime against humanity." This is a quote from Arundhati Roy on India's COVID catastrophe. That's the author of the article. Let's see. Is there something down below that will tell me, are we talking about a regular correspondent or is this a special op-ed type offering here? It's very difficult for me to find in their formatting the answer to that question. But let's see. We could look it up, certainly, but it's not immediately evident. But the idea of thinking about what's happening in India as a crime against humanity, I mean, it certainly could become horrific because of the density and size of their population. But they are nearly 1.4 billion people. But the United States, this has always baffled me about how we weren't more down on ourselves about how poorly we did, or rather how poorly Trump forced us to do, with 33 million cases in the United States, with 332 million people, versus the 1.4 billion in India. They've still, the spike and everything, racked up just 20 million cases. And last night, in tweeting around the usual roundup stories and lists of who's got how much and where, someone else jumped to a weird conclusion, saying, where's India on your list? I was giving out the list of the most, I think at that point I was on the most new cases per million on any given day, on whatever the day was. And where is India on this list? It was demanded. And it was also followed up with the fun accusation of, are you just counting white deaths? Like you're a racist. You're only counting the European countries and are the only ones on this list. But that was because these European countries, and it was a mixed bag, but it was mostly European countries, had the highest, it's nothing racist about it. They happen to, by population, have had the most new cases that day per 1 million in population. And I reminded there, India is on the list of the most cases in terms of raw numbers on this day. But remember, dividing that among the 1.4 billion people that they've got in India, the 300,000 something new cases that they had that day doesn't even put them in the top 100 of total cases per 1 million population. They got a lot of millions over there, 14,000 of them to go through. So I think India, in terms of the total cases per population, by comparison, the United States, which is about 9th or 10th on the list of most cases per million population, is 99,759 cases per million people. It's 9.97% of the population. In India, they're running 14,383, or 1.4% of the population. So it's much lower, you see. But it could get huge. But they're already talking crimes against humanity, which is pretty amazing. Given that, again, we have with 3, 6, 9, 12, somewhere between 4 and 5 times more population in India than there is here in the United States. We still have well over twice the number of deaths from coronavirus. If what's happening in India is a crime against humanity, you got a great charge against Donald J. Trump. He too would be guilty of the same. So I wanted to throw that out for your consideration. And we'll shift for just a few minutes, the last couple minutes of the show, off of the coronavirus and on to other topics. I mentioned to you the fun-sounding headline over in the Hill, GOP turns lies into laws. And it's, happening everywhere. What's going on over in Arizona is one of the chief examples of it. And, it should worry you, absolutely. Some of the latest reporting on what was going on there in Arizona is available really only in video form from CNN. But they had a great video, and I'll give you a link to it, and I can't play the whole thing or anything, but reporters covering the situation there, watching this recount that Greg, like me, marvels that it's even allowed to go forward. Just to give you some idea of the weird irregularities that are going on in all of this. They're conducting the recount. I gave you some of the news about how they're conducting the recount inside this convention center, and they were shining ultraviolet light on the ballots, and nobody could really figure out what that was about or why they were doing it. The CNN reporter that went to the convention center for the first couple days of the recount was essentially just denied access to the arena. They were not allowed to go in and observe what things were going on. Eventually, I think they relented and let them in. But the CNN reporter put themselves at the entrance gate to the parking area where the volunteers who were volunteers or those who had been hired by cyber ninjas, the outfit conducting this so-called audit, were coming in to park and go to work. And she was noticing, by the way, she's like, this is weird, but here's some, get a shot, she's telling the cameraman, of these cars as they come in with bumper stickers. Don't blame me, I voted for Trump. Anti-BLM stickers, anti-Antifa stickers, and all the pro-Trump stuff you could ever hope to see or wish you wouldn't see on all these. So their hardcore Trump supporters are coming in to do the counting, which, probably not the way things should work. And as she's interviewing a couple of people, and one or two of them consented to answer at least some basic questions about what they were doing and how did they get the job and what are they doing. But then you started to see, as people observed the reporter, asking questions and pointing the microphone to the car, when they came up, when they were next in line, you started to see they were, you're not supposed to say they're Karens, but they are there. They've got their phones out and they're videotaping the CNN crew asking them questions, saying, I don't trust you. I'm not going to answer your questions. You're lying press. Lügenpresse. Why was it that? Was that the German for it? Anyway, all sorts of things, and people refusing to answer questions. I think one woman rolled down her window and said, "Are you One America News?" And they said, "No, we're CNN." All right, and she rolled her window back up. That was at least like passingly polite. The one filming them was pretty hilarious. So totally normal things happening there, including when she continued to interview people. She's approached by people in cowboy hats and badges and what looks like police gear. And so CNN's reporter here is Kyung La, who reports for Anderson Cooper's program. Men with badges tried to stop CNN reporter, and they weren't police. So who are they? And they had these badges, and apparently they were cyber ninja badges. Can you believe the cyber ninjas actually have badges? I mean, they're not legitimate badges or anything, but just to give them to them to make them feel important, I guess. Very weird. And of course, nobody understands their technique, and they're in court. They're litigating whether or not they actually have to tell the court what their techniques are. I wonder when they expect to announce their results. Trump also over the weekend, you try not to watch what goes on with Trump so closely, but he continues his habit. It's really sort of sad in a way of basically he's hanging around Mar-a-Lago, crashing weddings, and then grabbing the microphone and using it to say, it's a few perfunctory words. He might have learned the names of the couple being married or something like that. So maybe not. Maybe he just goes right to it and just says, some generic words. Beautiful, beautiful couple. Fantastic people getting married here. It's so beautiful to see. But I got to tell you, this election, it's so rigged. It's terrible. They rigged everything against me. And they're going to find a lot of ballots. A lot of ballots. And he went on, he's talking about the Arizona thing. It was clear that he was talking about the current situation. You're going to see in this audit, there's going to be thousands and thousands of ballots in Arizona. But then he embellishes. And other places, Wisconsin, Georgia, New Hampshire. Even in New Hampshire, they're finding lots of ballots. And New Hampshire was never close. They're not auditing anything in New Hampshire. But he's allowed to stand up there, takes the microphone away from the band at somebody's wedding to do this. And I guess they tolerate it. They're only having their wedding at Mar-a-Lago because they're Trump fans, presumably. But not much even in the way of applause or cheering for his comments. It's just kind of super pathetic that this guy is, so out of it. And I guess we are where we are, spending 45, or rather 3/4 of the show anyway, on the coronavirus pandemic instead of the politics. One, because now that he's kind of out of the politics, it's not always such an emergency to tell you what horrific thing he's doing. But the legacy is he's left us with this pandemic we can't get out of, in which India, at half our rate of deaths among 5 times as many populations, says there's a crime against humanity underway. This babbling idiot that thinks they're recounting ballots is the guy who was supposed to be in charge of protecting the world from the coronavirus. And now we are where we are, and people are worried about crimes against humanity because this guy said it's just the flu, and anyway, I don't want to smear my makeup. He couldn't wear masks because he wasn't going to wear one because makeup. Whatever. I know, it's ground we've been over before, but it's time to close out the show. The new stuff comes up next. Justice Putnam will bring you the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy and give you a broader taste for the things that we didn't obsess on today.
NetworksRadio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Lots on tap for you, of course. More about Rudy Giuliani and the connection of his efforts to the ouster of the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine. You remember all about that. And California Democrats have sharpened their anti-recall messaging. Good. It's about time, too. Unbelievable situation. Unbelievable. See you tomorrow.